China is preparing for war in the Pacific. Is the U.S. ready to face the challenge? Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. YouTube has been trying to suppress China Uncensored and promote pro-CCP content, but we're fighting back and winning. Join me in Operation Honeypot Phase 3. Leave a honeypot comment to show YouTube we've got engagement, and subscribe to our free newsletter to subvert YouTube censorship. The link is below. And now, on with the show. So we've talked many times about the challenges the U.S. faces if it ever has to go to war with China, including the sheer size of China's Navy, China's insane shipbuilding capacity, and the simple fact that the U.S. gets way too much critical stuff from China. But there's more to it than that. And it's not just about the obvious threats, because China has spent decades quietly gaining control of the Pacific by setting up dual-use infrastructure that China can use in the event of war. This includes dozens of Belt and Road Initiative projects throughout the region that shift financial responsibility to international bodies while masking Beijing's intentions. According to Domingo Yikui Yang, an assistant research fellow at Taiwan's Institute for National Defense and Security Research, far from being driven solely by economic interests, these infrastructure projects seek to multiply China's strategic influence through dual-use software, hardware, and a broader Chinese-built ecosystem. These assets could be weaponized in the transition from peace to war, limiting regional actors' freedom of action and enabling China to achieve its strategic objectives. By Chinese law, any so-called private company has to cooperate with the Chinese military. They call it civil-military fusion. So these ports, these infrastructure projects, are essentially already in the hands of the Chinese military. And there are a lot of these strategic projects. 39 identified by Yang's research, plus another 11 identified by Newsweek, bringing the total to at least 50. An investment of some $3.5 billion. In short, China has been building a wall to shut out the United States, and it's stretched across islands throughout the Pacific Ocean. So what does this Great Pacific Wall look like? Well, for example, there are the ports that Chinese companies have extended, such as Luganville Wharf in Vanuatu, and Iwo Port Terminal in Nauru, among others. They claim it's to attract cruise ships and bring economic development. But China's upgrades could also make it easier to transport fuel for military activities and to dock Chinese warships. In fact, since 2010, the People's Liberation Army Navy has been visiting ports in Oceania more often for some strange reason, such as this quote-unquote hospital ship visiting Port Vila in Vanuatu in 2023. And now we're seeing some of China's most powerful naval vessels, like the Type 055 and Type 052DL there as well. China's fishery projects are also worth keeping an eye on. Back in 2020, China's Fujian Zhonghong Fishery Company signed a deal with Papua New Guinea to build a fishery industrial park on Daru Island in the Torres Strait, a major choke point, close to where China and Australia have been clashing recently. Yang points out that by securing this fishery deal, China gains access to the Torres Strait protected zone under the Torres Strait Treaty. This treaty permits indigenous Torres Strait Islanders and coastal Papua New Guineans to move freely within the zone for traditional activities such as fishing without passports or visas, potentially creating an avenue for Chinese influence in the region. We've already seen how China takes advantage of loose passport and visa requirements to expand Chinese influence and crime. Who knows what other opportunities China sees through its fishery deals? China's also been very, very busy making airport upgrades, especially in Papua New Guinea, with more planned in the Solomon Islands, Kiribati, and more. In fact, workers in PLA Navy-style uniforms were observed illegally clearing land near an airport in Vanuatu, which raises concern that China's military could use Pacific Islands to deploy anything from J-20 fighter jets to H-6 bombers, to KJ-700 early warning aircraft and Y-20 cargo planes to spy, move military assets around, and directly attack U.S. forces. Among the airports identified in the Pacific, at least 12 of the airports could now accommodate China's biggest military transporter. But it's not just military assets that China's preparing to deploy. There's also China's Coast Guard. In 2020 and 2024, China registered 26 inspection vessels to the North Pacific Fisheries Commission and 26 to the Western and Central Pacific Fisheries Commission. If you look at the list side by side, you'll notice that the exact same vessels are registered to both commissions. And according to Anne-Marie Brady at the University of Canterbury in New Zealand, this gives the Chinese Coast Guard the powers to board any foreign fishing vessels on the high seas in the first, second, and third island chains, which extends China's zone of control way out into the Pacific Ocean. It's possible they'll misuse their inspection powers to intimidate neighbors. Did I say possible? I meant to say it's already been doing that. Aside from harassing the Japanese, the Chinese Coast Guard is also harassing Taiwanese tourists and Filipino ships under the guise of law enforcement. Why not do the same further east into the Pacific? It's possible the Chinese Coast Guard could even participate in joint operations near the Pacific Islands with China's Navy, as they've done that in military drills practicing a blockade of Taiwan. And all of this is supported even more by China's Information and Communication Technologies projects. These projects span integrated government information systems, national broadband networks, submarine cables, and mobile communication towers. These things are very helpful for local populations in the Pacific. And if they just happen to be useful for the Chinese military as well, who could blame them for taking advantage of the infrastructure they built? The Chinese Communist Party doesn't deny its investments in the Pacific. Asked about its goals there, a representative of the Chinese embassy in Washington, D.C. told Newsweek, to build a better future with its neighbors, China will hold high the banner of community with a shared future for mankind, which is newspeak for a world where everyone is communist. All this and more is why the U.S. and its allies need to pay more attention to the Pacific and take meaningful steps that'll keep Chinese influence out of the region. If they don't, then the U.S. and its allies will find themselves at a major disadvantage should war break out. Not exactly the kind of future I would want the world to witness. That's why I'm hard at work spreading this kind of information to as many people as possible. If only YouTube weren't soft censoring us, we'd be able to get so many more views. So if you like this episode, remember to subscribe to our free weekly newsletter so you can see all our episodes, even when YouTube doesn't want you to. The link is below. Thanks for watching China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.